Welcome to Larry's Library. This week, we're going to take a hard look at the two biggest comic book database programs available today, in my opinion. And we're going to look at their strengths and their weaknesses, and we're going to put them head to head. And I'm talking about Comic Collector Pro from Collector Z Software, aka CLZ, and ComicBase Pro from Human Computing. And we're just going to get right into it. Now, I should mention this is sort of a sequel in many ways to my video about how to catalog and keep track of a comic collection. And I'll put a link up here, there maybe, and down below. I'll link it up. So if you haven't watched that one yet, you should watch that first, because you'll get a lot of background on my background with both of these programs, because I'm heavily invested in both of them in many ways, with time and money. So check that out first, if you will. Then come back and watch this one if you haven't already seen the other. These programs have a lot of differences and a lot of similarities, and we're going to kind of go through some of those. But first, we're going to look at their mobile counterparts. Now, if you only want a mobile app to take care of your collection, then there really is no contest here. I hate to say it, but CLZ is the one, hands down. I wish I could say otherwise, but ComicBase's mobile offering is bare bones, to say the least. The CLZ app is much more advanced, much better looking, and in many ways it's easier to use. So, if that's your only requirement, is something to have on your smartphone, take with you, then CLZ is going to be your answer. But if you want more than just a little app on your phone, if you want full-blown database on your computer, on a laptop or a desktop, then you're going to want to compare these two and make a decision based on that. So let's get into that. Now, ComicBase comes in some lower SKUs than Pro. There's a free version that you can enter like 500 issues into, and then you're capped. And then there's an express version, which you can add more to, but it's very limited on features. I'm not even going to get into those. We're going to start with Pro. We're going to assume you have Pro or higher for the sake of this comparison. Now, Comic Collector for the desktop, really the only one you want to consider is the Pro version. The Pro desktop, and that may be all that's left at this point. He's pared down a lot of the SKUs over the years. The guy who owns Comic Collector, Alwyn is his name. Anyway, so we're going to compare Comic Collector Pro to ComicBase Professional and up. Now, price-wise, CLZ Comic Collector. In fact, going forward, we're just going to call, for the sake of brevity, give myself a break, we're going to call Comic Collector CLZ, even though that's technically what they used to call their mobile app, and their desktop app they call Comic Collector Pro. We're going to say CLZ just for brevity. And for ComicBase, I'm going to say CB for brevity, but I'm talking about ComicBase Professional. So bear that in mind, please. So price-wise, CLZ seems to have it all over ComicBase. It really isn't much of a contest here. Comic Collector Pro desktop you can get for $29.95, and that is an annual subscription. Sadly, that's what the industries went to these days. Everything's a subscription. They don't want you just to pay once, they want you to pay, and they want you to keep paying. That's the reality of software in the modern times. So, like it or not, that's where we're at. ComicBase Professional is $159.95 annually. Now, that sounds like a big price, and it kind of is, but we'll get into more of what all that entails later. Now, that in CLZ, that only gets you comic books, whereas in ComicBase, they have a feature that also adds newspapers. I mean, there are people that collect newspapers, apparently. I didn't know that, but there are. Newspapers, magazines, and books. They're actually separate modules, but they come within the program, and you can toggle between them. It's pretty cool. And that is included. Now, if you want regular books, non-comic books, to be covered in CLZ, you got to pay for Book Collector Pro, separate app. And that's also $29.95 a year. So they'll give you a slight break. If you get both of them together, it's $55.50 a year. Now, you're still looking at paying 3 times that for ComicBase. But we'll get into what all that gives you soon. So, now, if you compare the UIs, the user interface of both on the desktop is pretty nice. As you can see here in this comparison, you can get them both in a nice black motif if you like. There are different themes available. You can get a lighter color if that's your thing. And that's true of both programs. So I think in UI, they're pretty equal. They're very different, as you can see. They're very different from one another. But I'm not sure I could say one is objectively better than the other in regards to UI. Both have been upgraded over the years to full 64-bit, which means it'll take advantage of all the RAM you got, and a new powerful machine will make these things perform better than an older machine, for sure. So they're both 64-bit programs, and that's good. Now, what all comes with this? With ComicBase, you get some big cover images, and a lot of them. You get ComicBase Professional and up, you'll get a nice big image. Not for every comic book on earth, but for a lot of them. And they're pretty good quality for the most part. Now, you contrast that with CLZ, and that's I guess that's one of the prices of paying a lot less. One of the disadvantages is all the covers I've ever seen that came free with Comic Collector were pretty small, pretty low resolution, and not great at all. They're just about big enough to tell what you're looking at, and that's about it. I think most of them are about 300 pixels in height. There's a few that get up to 600, and I think I might have seen 1 or 2 over the years that actually came through as 700 pixels in height, which is still pretty small. Now, if you don't know what those pixel sizes are reference to, I'll give you an idea here. An HD television is 1080p. They're talking about the vertical pixels. It's 1080 pixels in height. 4K is 2160. So that gives you an idea. 700, not very big. And smaller than that, we're talking postage stamps on a modern screen. So that's a clear advantage for ComicBase as far as cover images. Now, one thing you need to understand that a lot of people don't, especially if you're coming into this new to buying a database for your comic books, is the approach and the philosophy. We're talking about really 2 radically different things here when you're comparing Comic Collector, CLZ, with ComicBase. ComicBase is the world's largest comic book database. And they can say that, well, because it's true. They cover the most issues, the most titles of any other database on earth. And we're not talking about just a piece of software. We're talking about published databases. ComicBase has the most. And you get that when you buy the Pro or higher, you get access to the entire library. What's going to be installed on your computer is all the issues and the titles that they've ever indexed. You're going to get them. I mean, you're going to get a listing for them on your grid. You're going to be able to scroll through, see covers for the majority of them, so you can see what they look like. And then you put in there what the quantity is of those you own. The default is 0. You put in if you have 1 or 2, or and I'm talking individual issues. Now, you don't have to scroll through, say, 1,000 issues of Superman to find the 50 you own. You can go up and toggle on the menu to view only items I own is one option. And then it'll just list the items that you've marked as your quantity being 1 or greater. Now, you contrast that to CLZ, they have the exact opposite approach. You only download and list, at least this is the intention. I mean, you can say you own them all, I suppose, and download it all. But the way it's supposed to work is you pull down the issues you own, and that's what's inserted in your database. Just the issues of the title that you own, not the entire catalog that they've indexed. So it's a totally different approach, and I think both are valid, both have advantages and disadvantages. I mean, the advantage is with CLZ is you're going to have a much smaller footprint on your hard drive, if that's important to you. I mean, if you take the entire 4K archive edition of ComicBase and install it, as I have done, it's still less than 2 gigabytes space it's going to take up on your drive. It's like mine is like 1.4 gigabytes, I think, right now. Now, that's going to vary with how many high-res images you've downloaded. And I don't want to get too far into the weeds with the details of how that works. I can in future videos if you want to know that. I can go as deep as you guys want to go. Just let me know, and we'll see how it does. And this series, this could become a series. It could continue if I think there's enough interest for it. But at any rate, about 1.4, 1.5 gigabytes is going to get you basically the entire catalog of ComicBase. Now, CLZ, much, much smaller, a magnitude smaller. But again, you're only downloading the issues you have. And that may be appealing to you. That may be all you want or need. But the case I make for ComicBase is if you have an interest beyond just your collection, if you have an interest in the history of comic books, if you want to see all the ones you don't have and you want them at your fingertips, well, then you're going to want to get ComicBase Pro or above because you're going to get all of that. Now, as far as what data is in there, I think they're pretty close as far as once you pull up an individual issue, you get, your creator credits for artist, writer, inker, editor, letterer. And this is not the same for every issue. Some are filled in completely, some are not. And what's cool is you can add to that whenever you want. And if you see something that's wrong, you can correct it. And you can submit these corrections to the master database. Now, you can do this in both programs. And I have done so a lot in both of them. Now, one cool thing about ComicBase is they have a leaderboard that shows the top 250 contributors. They keep track of them with points. I mean, the points aren't worth anything other than, attaboy, and you can just kind of compete with other people. It's fun. It's kind of like Whose Line Is It Anyway, or the rules are made up and the points don't matter. Rules aren't made up here. But the points kind of don't matter except your position on that leaderboard. Now, CLZ doesn't have anything that I'm aware of that's remotely like that. You don't get any kind of credit whatsoever. It's just, But, and that's kind of a bummer that they don't have something like that because I think it is important to give people credit when they help, in my opinion. So yes, ComicBase costs a magnitude more, but you get a magnitude more content. And in fact, if you go to the higher, larger cover images versions of the software, there's an archive tier and a 4K archive. They're even more costly. The archive is $299.95 a year. The 4K archive is $359.95. Now, I should say these are your first-time purchase price. And when you go to renew the next year, you get a serious break. Much, much cheaper. Half or so. Usually, sometimes less, I think. He has sales and whatnot. So, it's still a large chunk of money. But if you really are interested in the full breadth of history of comic books, and you want to have all that at your fingertips, and I think some of my viewers probably are into that, because I certainly am, then you're going to want to go with ComicBase. Now, I've tried to compare some of the technical details of how this works without getting too far in the weeds. But there's another thing that you just can't see by looking at screenshots or hearing somebody like me ramble about it. Or even looking on the individual software vendors' websites. You're not going to learn that. And I'm talking about ethics and trust. Now, this is where I could get into some trouble, and I'm going to try not. Because I've tried to stay as positive as I can on this channel when I review comics or really anything. But there comes a time when you gotta say what you believe and say what you've learned. And if you look at the history of both programs, both companies, then you get into a question of ethics and trust. And what can you expect to happen in the future? I mean, if you're buying into these programs and you're going to invest a lot of time, money aside, it's going to take you some effort and some time of your own, investment in time and effort on your part to put your collections into either one of these programs. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. They've made it as easy as possible. And if you don't care much about all these tiny little details, the credits and whatnot, you can even enter them by zapping the barcode. So you can make it pretty simple. But nevertheless, ethics and trust come into play when you're talking about investing in software. And the owner of CLZ, Alwyn, I have had some contact with him over the years, going back decades, and I have never had a problem with the man, not once. I'm going to be honest, I've never had any issues with him. But if you do much digging online, and you can do that, I'm going to let you do that on your own. I'm not going to dredge these things up, but I'm just going to talk about what I know about them and what I've heard, what I've seen. Comic Collector used to have a thriving forum on their website. It was wonderful. I loved it. I hung out there. A lot of people did. We shared our collections and information, and sometimes we would submit, corrections there, and we would talk about and argue about things. It was just great. It was a real community. Went on for some years. And then Alwyn, back then he offered a lifetime license. You bought it once and you owned it forever. And he stated that you had access to all software updates going forward for the life of the program. Lifetime license. Until it wasn't. Until he brought out a model that wasn't. And he went to the subscription-based deal that we're all accustomed to of modern software. When he put that into place, he decided that the lifetime licenses no longer applied, because now the program was a subscription-based deal. Well, that didn't sit well with people like me that paid for a lifetime license, or me and many, many others. And we took to those forums on his website, and we talked about it, and I guess there was sort of a little bit of a revolt going on. He didn't like that. He didn't like that at all. But he did finally relent, and he decided, well, okay, if you could prove to me that you bought a lifetime license by showing me the email receipt, or at least having access to the email, and you can tell me the time frame you bought. I mean, I forget all the details, so forgive me if I've got some of that wrong. You can look it up. If you want to dig into that yourself, you can. But I'm going off memory here, and I'm old, so I may have forgotten. But I was one of those guys who had a receipt from 12 years previous, and I did produce it. And so I was grandfathered in. So I have the current license. It just says lifetime. Now, I don't get, let's see, what is that I'm left out of? I don't get updates for all the current stuff. I think that may be the limitation. I forget. But I was reluctantly grandfathered in. And me, not just me, there was many others. But this was only after we balked about it and really had a minor revolt on the forums about this issue that he finally relented and agreed to grandfather in the lifetime licensees. Shortly after that, if memory serves, he shut that forum down completely. It's just gone. All those posts, all those conversations, all those friendly discussions, all of it gone. He wiped it out. He couldn't control the narrative. He didn't want to deal with it. It's gone. So to this day, if that's the software you're using, there's no forum for it. There was even a case a few years later where someone decided to make a subreddit about this software where people could discuss things. Can you guess what happened to that? Yeah. Alwyn more or less shut that down. So that didn't continue either. So what do they have? They have a support feature on the website. And if you want to have more customer to customer help, or if you want to talk directly to them, you can email them. You can go on the website. Or you can do what they want you to do, go to Facebook. So if you're someone like me that detests Facebook and just refuse to deal with Facebook, well, you're left out. So, I mean, that's a choice I've made. I don't like Facebook. I don't like their policies. I just don't like it at all. So, not doing that. Yeah, you don't have to use Facebook to use the program. So, maybe that's not important to you, or maybe you love Facebook. Now, if you contrast that to ComicBase, Peter Bickford, the owner and the developer of the program, Often you call him for support. Often you get him directly on the phone. Kind of amazing in this day and age, but that happens sometimes. He does a weekly live show on YouTube where he takes questions from the chat, technical questions, what have you. Sometimes they're just for fun. But he does this every week, and he's been doing it for years. So that's pretty cool. You got direct access to the creator and the main developer of the program. So they also have a forum on the website that's pretty active, and that's nice. So if any of that stuff's important to you, that may sway you one direction or the other. Now, when I talk about trust, here's something. Over the years, Comic Collector, they have various versions of the program. They've got the mobile program. They've got the desktop. They had a Mac desktop version. They stopped development of that. It's gone. Got rid of that. They still have the Windows version, and it's still being developed and updated, as far as I know. But I have to wonder, how long will that continue? You know, because they have a web version, Comic Connect, I think it's called, that they push pretty hard. If you go to the website now, if you want to find the Windows desktop version, you got to drill down to the bottom and you got to look down in some small print, and then you can find it and you can still buy it. But they sure seem to be, you know, it makes me think it's on its way out. And that really bothers me, because that's my preferred method for doing things, is the Windows desktop. Now, maybe that's because I'm an old guy, I'm an old geek, and that's what I'm used to, but that's what I love. And if that's what you love, then I'm just going to put the idea forth. Maybe you don't want to invest in something that might go away. And speaking of that, it's not clear what happens when you stop paying the subscription for CLZ. I mean, what you get on these updates is the new issues that are added weekly as comic books come out, and as hardcovers and whatnot, all that comes out, gets entered into the database. Or if not, you can enter it yourself, you know. And you get those. You stop paying, you're cut off from those. But the question remains, can you still add new stuff with the aid of their server if you're not paying anymore? I'm thinking you probably will not. Or if you are, it's probably going to cut off at a certain point. And that bothers me. Now, if you contrast that to the way Peter Bickford, creator and developer of ComicBase, does it, he has stated many times in his live streams that he believes that your data is your data. And he's not going to restrict your access to that data. That's why the whole thing is installed on your hard drive. And even if you stop paying and you don't get the next year's subscription upgrade, your database is still your database. Now, of course, he's not going to provide you with more newer issues and access to his servers indefinitely if you're not paying. I get that. But what's sitting on your hard drive is unlocked forever for you, because that's what you paid for. In fact, Peter Bickford has helped people with 5-6-year-old outdated versions of ComicBase. He still supports it. You know, I've heard him talking about it before, and I've heard other people mention it, that he spent time on the phone working through problems with a database that's 5 versions back, you know. But that's the kind of guy he is. He stands up and he supports his products. And I like that. And he seems honest. Painfully so at times if you watch his live streams. He talks about the good and the bad and the challenges he's had, and the things that's worked and the things that hasn't worked. But he's constantly developing it, and he's super honest about it. And to me, that's worth some money, you know. And I like having access to the world's largest database of comic books, the biggest one on earth. And that's ComicBase. And that's what I've ended up going back to. If you've watched that first video, you know that I've been back and forth over the years. I've put a lot of effort and time into both of these things. My collection's DNA is part of both of these archives. You know, so I feel like I'm in a pretty good position to give you an unbiased view and an unbiased opinion on which one's better. And I'm going to say it's ComicBase. I think the trust is there. I think the ethics are right, and I think it's the better buy, even at 4 times the cost, 3-4 times the cost. I still think it's the better buy, you know. And like I said, that big sum is only to get you in the door. The next year's is going to be somewhere around, half the cost. That depends, so don't quote me on that, but you can check it out. Anyway, I'll have links down below to both programs, and you can make the choice yourself. And you might be like me and you end up trying both. Hey, that's up to you. But for me, the answer is ComicBase. I got the full-blown 4K archive edition, and I'm happy with it. So let me know what you end up doing. If you choose one of the over the other and why, put that down in the description. We'll talk, or down in the comments. We'll talk about it. Or do you roll your own? Are you still using Excel or something crazy like that? Or maybe notebook and paper. Maybe you're really old school. Yeah, I don't know. But if you like this kind of content, you want to see more, subscribe, hit the bell to notify yourself. And if you want to have more in-depth discussion of how I use ComicBase and how I enter my stuff, if you want this to continue as a series, let me know that too. And I may do a part 3 one day. But thanks for watching.